recording on my end, is
Mhm.
there something in particular that I need to hit? Because I have a call recorder, but it's for Skype.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Go to voice recorder. Are you on Windows or Mac?
Mac.
Mac. Okay, QuickTime then. Open up QuickTime and then just hit like uh there will be an option for like record on that app, and it'll just record your mic as you're plugged into your yeah, into your laptop.
Okay, done.
Sweet. Solid. Uh so yeah, man. One of the thing I'm just gonna like start
Okay.
going, and I'll just like go. No intro needed. So yeah, dude, I've been one of the things that I like wanted to sort of say was that before I actually met you, I had your internet reputation and persona had preceded you a little bit. And so I had just seen like photos of like post workout Jared just like jacked as hell and like roaring at the camera. And I honestly like back then I judged you. Like I judged it. I was like, this
Sure.
guy is just like too much, man. It's like so like frat bro Catholic.
Who's this meathead? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And then two things happened. One, when I started the business, I got super into Tim Ferriss and then realized that like I actually had to start working out in order to like be sane and productive. And it kind of like changed my whole mentality about like working out from just looking cool to like there's some real important like mental and spiritual benefit to this. And then the second thing was when I was working with you at St. Francis for the first time, and I think we are just packing up some musical equipment into a closet, and you were talking about like uh, sort of the saintly past of like the asceticism of bodily discipline and being willing to go through like bodily suffering for the sake of spiritual growth, and how that was like tied to how you worked out. And I was just super fascinated. And then we dropped it and I never got to pick up the conversation again. But that totally changed my like perspective on Jared Zimmerer. So that's my
That's awesome.
intro.
Oh man,
So,
yeah, and it's cool because it's been kind of like originally it started as kind of an apostolic work of trying to go outside the periphery of the church, try to show the church, the world, the fitness world, that we have something to offer. So often we see in the magazines or YouTube channels, all this stuff, it's all about the body, and certainly, I mean, fitness is obviously about getting healthy and things like that, but like, there's something deeper here. Like lives are changing just because they're picking up heavy barbells. So
hmm.
my thought process was, well, there's a history here of discipline and things like that. So what was it? What caused these things? One of my favorite bodybuilders is Dorian Yates, and he, as a young kid, got into a lot of trouble. Was put in juvie in England and stuff, and all of a sudden he started picking up barbells and totally changed his life around, and became
Hmm.
Mr. Olympia. I was like, there's something deeper here that causes character to form. And so that's kind of was the beginning process of it.
So how'd you get into bodybuilding? Were you always like a jacked like kid that was really, on top and jockey, or were you like
Well, what's funny is actually, like, as a kid, like when I was probably third or fourth grade, I was the fat kid. Like I was the
hmm,
kid in class that everybody poked fun of. I was the kid that wore the T-shirt into the pool, all that kind of stuff. But then I started getting into sports, particularly basketball. I really enjoyed. But as big as I was, I played football as well. And then in high school, I actually hurt my knee pretty bad. I dislocated my knee a couple of times playing football, and just realized that going on farther than high school probably wasn't going to happen.
yeah.
But I'm very competitive in a physical sense. I'm not necessarily like a mental competitive person, but more of just I like to compete. And bodybuilding ended up coming around because my knee was all messed up. The doctors basically said, you really ought to start lifting weights, keep that knee strong. And so I started hitting the weights, picked up, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and did the old school stuff, and just really fell in love with it. And it originally just started out as something maybe I'd try to compete in and things like that. And then all of a sudden I kept playing sports in high school, but my total focus switched over to bodybuilding, powerlifting, and martial arts. And so I started focusing more on that. And
Martial arts. What was the? Did he do MMA stuff and like grappling and all
well,
that?
even now I still do it. I originally I got into Jeet Kune Do. I'm a big fan of Bruce Lee, and so I got into that. I got into some American boxing as well, but also Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai as well. So I've kind of done a lot of
That's
different things.
that is so awesome, man.
So and it kind of became like it was my cardio. Like I can't stand just standing on a treadmill and running, but I do enjoy kind of the athletic side of martial arts and stuff. So I got into that as well. But my focus really was bodybuilding and powerlifting. That was kind of the main thing. But again, I'm just competitive. I enjoy competing with people, and there's kind of an internal competitiveness that happens in bodybuilding, like can I push myself? Can I pick up an extra 5 pounds? Can I eat another meal of nothing but tuna and rice? There's there's the whole thing, and so that was competitive within me, but then also with martial arts, it was kind of a, competing against someone else and all of that too. So, but yeah, it just became kind of this, I fell in love with the whole physical culture. There's kind of like a sports culture and a physical culture, if you really take a look at it in that way. And I fell in love more with the physical culture. And I competed I did one bodybuilding competition and did not like it. I enjoyed the workouts and the diet and all that kind of stuff, but man, when it came time to compete, it's pretty hardcore, and I did not like it. But I have been on a stage in a Speedo, so that's something to say that I've done.
And hopefully there's picture proof that can be put in the show notes.
There certainly is, yeah.
That's amazing. Dude, I am so I knew there was going to be a gold mine here, but I did not know how much of a gold mine there was going to be. So, at what point was the, I guess, the experience of getting into the physical side of like the culture of bodybuilding combined with the deeper theology of the new asceticism?
Yeah, so that started. I really kind of had, I was born and raised in a Catholic family. I mean, you know my dad. We've kind of been family friends actually for a while. But born and raised in a very Catholic family, went to Catholic school. And when I say Catholic family, I mean we pray the Rosary 4 or 5 times a week as a family. We went to monthly confession as a family. We went to this place called the Apostolate for Family Consecration every summer. Just super Catholic. But for me, my real like reversion or conversion of heart happened in college. It happened right around the time that I met my now wife. At the time I was literally, kind of the meathead on campus. I was just living at the gym, and that's all I really cared about. I was getting a degree in kinesiology. That's my undergrad is in, and I started having a conversion of like, what is my life for? And I think part of that happened was because I started dating and getting very serious with this girl, and was at the time, I was living for the next party and just living for the next gym session. And being raised in that kind of a home, it was all about like purpose in life. And I realized like this stuff is very shallow that I'm doing here. I mean, the bodybuilding thing was kind of shallow, but just in general, like I was just living for the next party and all that kind of stuff. And so I finally kind of took a step back and said, what is this all for? And so I started reading. Originally, I actually went to the ancient Greeks and Romans. I went to Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, Marcus Cicero, and the like. And they talked a lot about duty and honor and really, a sound mind and a sound body and a sound mind. And so it kind of started to wake me up a little bit. And then I had an opportunity to go to Mexico City with my father on a mission trip. And I started learning about the Cristeros War and Miguel Pro. And I remember for some reason that story in particular of his martyrdom just like was like a shot to the heart, man. I was like, man, that's what I want.
What was the story? Like what?
So Miguel Pro was a Jesuit priest, and if you know something about the Cristeros War, basically what happened is the Mexican government completely outlawed Catholicism in Mexico in the early 1900s. And certain people started to fight back. I mean, you're talking about a country that was like 90 to 95% Catholic, and they just outlawed the entire thing, where priests were getting shot in the street, and a lot of them ended up abandoning the faith, and they were trying to basically push the secular mindset. And this guy, Miguel Pro, decided that he's going to stay with his people and fight through the sacraments, and to be there for his people. And so he would actually like dress in disguise. So some days he'd be dressed like an engineer, some days he'd be dressed like a businessman, things like that. But he would go into people's homes and secretly baptize babies. He would say mass, underground, basically. And after a while, he ended up getting caught. They brought him to the court and sentenced him to death in front of the gun range. And on the way, he's forgiving every man that's holding a gun. And as he stands in front of them, he holds a crucifix in one hand and a rosary in the other, and just screams out, "Viva Cristo Rey!" Long live Christ the King. And even now, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just telling of the story, because like that to me is like, that's a life that's utterly fulfilled with purpose. There's something really deep there that he can literally stare a gun in the face and not care. Like all of us are scared of death, but this dude stands up there and faces it with a smile and an embrace. And to me, that just hit my heart really deeply. And so then I started going deeper into my faith. And that's when I started reading like Fulton Sheen, Thomas Aquinas, the Catechism, and the like. And I had a pretty major conversion. And for a while, I ended up thinking, well, maybe the whole bodybuilding thing really isn't going to be something that I can continue, because it's at that time, my mindset was, well, it's all vain. It's all about vanity. It's all about ego, and things like that. And then I read, the theology of the body, and really started to consider the fact that what John Paul II was doing is recognizing the dignity of the human person, through the naturalness, right? Like through that which God has already imbued into us. And so if the body can naturally get stronger, if it can do certain things, like you eat a certain way, you exercise a certain way, and it slowly becomes more healthy and looks better, well, that means that why shouldn't we operate with that? Work with what God has given us, to be strong, to be healthy. And so I started digging deeper into it, and then I really looked back into the ancient ways of like the disciplines of like the early desert fathers, and many of the like. But a lot of them were pretty extreme in the modern sense, because a lot of them, they wear hair shirts and disappear to the desert and eat grasshoppers. Like I couldn't do that, and most people, in the modern world simply can't. But what's something that the average Joe in the pew can take part in, and what's something that is already available to them? And to me, the fitness boom that happened kind of with Arnold and Steve Reeves and the like has been a little bit of a blessing, because of them, there's now a gym on literally every corner in the world. And the vast majority of people either want to be in the gym, are currently in the gym, or have this great desire to be in the gym. And so I thought, there's a disciplinary act to this, where you think about what you eat. It's, in a fast food culture, to say no to the constant cheeseburgers and all of that, it's tough. I mean, it sounds wimpy, because all you're doing is saying no to a cheeseburger, but it legitimately is a fast food culture. And so to step back and say, no, I'm going to take forth the time and effort to eat natural foods, and to, prepare my diet and things like that. There's discipline in that. And then, of course, there's certain virtues that you learn along the way. So it really kind of came about because originally my passion was in this fitness realm. And then I had a conversion, and realized, like, all things can be found in Christ. So why not bodybuilding?
Dude, I love it. So you said pretty much everybody like has at least a desire to be in the gym, but I have never ever had a desire ever to be in the gym. Like my like I was the kid that was super scrawny, just loved to run, and as soon as like I got put in a gym for football, I just like was bored out of my mind. And
Sure.
I
But you said you like to run, right?
Yeah,
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 so that's another type of fitness though, right? Like guys that run marathons, I have the highest respect for because I could never ever do that.
yeah.
That's unbelievable.
It's I think that you're right though, that the boom of the fitness culture has actually been um the one of the most interesting and hopeful and spiritual uh doorways in the culture right now. Like if you look at the places where people are finding deeper meaning and life change and community and an opening to the mystical life, like it's in CrossFit, it's in Soul Cycle, it's in uh, lifetime gym memberships in the yoga class or the studio. I mean, it is a a place where people are finding their identity and a deeper meaning in life. And I don't think that that is actually the church has been really threatened by that, right? Like yoga studios cropping up, and we're all like, God damn it, you know, Buddhism is taking over. But it's really funny. Like people that I know that would have been completely atheistic and totally closed off to a spiritual worldview or a mythological worldview, have found that in working out and in the I guess places of worship that are gyms and yoga studios and all of that, um, which has been, at least for me, like uh, I don't really understand the church's like approach to being so dualistic about it. Like that's them, this is us. We have theology of the body conferences where we sit down and listen to people talking about how important the body is all day. But uh, yeah, we're definitely never gonna do yoga or like work out together. You know, like
Right.
that's
Right.
threatening.
And
That's
I
of the
think there's
devil.
like for sure. Yeah, and you know, and one of the biggest things that I've come up against is a lot of people thinking that it's just pure vanity, you know, that and my thing is like, well, I mean, if we're called to be disciples, right? Like if I'm called to be a good husband and father, it requires a lot of energy, it requires a lot of time and effort. Why not build myself up to be able to handle that? I mean, I have 6 kids. The amount of energy it takes to be around them, to play with them, to wrestle them after a long day, like I know it's because of my fitness that I can get up and do it and be around them. But you're absolutely right though. Like you hit on something of, you know, particularly community, and this is something that I think the church is struggling with pretty seriously right now. In a lot of places, is a solid community life. But in the gym, for some reason, it just happens almost completely naturally. I mean, and I always say, well, you know, I've done martial arts and I've done gym stuff. So when you're spotting a guy, you're getting pretty close to him, you know, and you're automatically creating this friendship. you know,
Yeah,
you know, all you do is ask for a spot, and the next time you see him, like, hey, what's up, man? Like, it's super easy to create a friend in a gym. And same thing. I mean, when you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I always laugh because it's like you're doing whisker rubs with other dudes. Like you're getting ultimately close with them, and you create a friendship like right off the bat because you both have this common goal. You both know like we're in this together to try to create something amazing. There's no judgment here. We're all just here to be the best version of ourselves. And for some reason, gym culture has really been able to do that very, very well.
yeah. It. I feel like, man, there's just so much that I want to talk about here because I when I look at the church and it's the ancient culture of the church that was deeply aesthetic, um, or experiencing the aesthetic mystical life, that was something that bonded people, you
Mhm.
know? When everyone has to fast for Lent, if you're in a culture where everyone actually is fasting for Lent and going hard, like you have these conversations with people where you're like, "Oh, me too." Like I I woke up dreaming about food today, you know, and you laugh together about it. Like you have a common experience that other people are not having right now, and it builds you into a tribe, right? And like for some reason Catholic culture right now is so super intellectual that like we will take something like that and completely forget about the bodily like portion of it and uh conceptualize the whole thing, right? Like make it super spiritual and super conceptual and philosophical and theological, talk about modernism and, you know, idiotic like postmodern world and relativism, and then just completely forget that part of our core history was that we had these very physical experiences together as people, and that's part of what bonded us, right? Like fasting and feasting.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and Thomas Merton would say that what we're participating in is actually the incarnation, right?
mhm.
The minute you bring your body into the spiritual journey, you're participating in the very thing that Christ did himself, of the incarnation. And so the fact of the incarnation almost requires us to make sure that the body is a huge part of our spirituality. And you're right, we've become it's almost like it's a Platonic dualism of thinking
Yeah.
that, the body is just sort of this shell, that might be more might have more tendency towards evil. So really, all I need to worry about is my soul, and with that comes
Mhm.
the mind, right? Because ultimately, that's what's going to get us to heaven. And certainly, I mean, we can't discount the fact that the soul is by far the most important, but discounting the body is also very dangerous. I mean, you can become almost Victorian in the way that they were, these Puritans, and I think that's why we've had such a reaction against Puritanism, and now we've got the culture that we've got, because we went so far the opposite way that now we're on the other side of the swing, but yet still within kind of the Christian circles. It's still pretty intellectual and stuff, but there is certainly a movement of interest of coming back to asceticism. You see a lot of there's like Exodus 90, Nineveh 90, some of these other ones that people are partaking in. And I think it's awesome. I think that the more people can realize that there's reasons why we have seasons of asceticism, because we're called to remember our bodies, and we're called to remember the suffering of Christ. And so whenever we take on these disciplines, that we're participating in that.
Mm. So let's get super concrete, man. I want to hear about your personal ascetic like routines. How do you keep your energy up? How do you meld together your spirituality and your and bodybuilding?
So I'm really big on getting up early. That's just my personal thing. It's something that was ingrained in me by my own dad. My dad's a big. He's up at 4:30 every day. Like, that guy just can do it easily. And I've kind of had to teach myself, because as my life got busier and as I started having kids, like, I had to find time to pray. And the only time I could find to pray was in the morning. And so that meant, I had to get up a little bit earlier than everyone else to have some quiet time. And so in large part, I'm up about 5 o'clock almost every day. I spend about 30 minutes in reading and prayer. And right before I do that, I make a big cup of coffee, get the caffeine in the blood. And then usually right after, that's whenever I either go to jujitsu or I lift in my garage. So over the years, I've been slowly accruing a lot of weights for my garage, and that's been a major help for me, because it's not taking away a lot of family time to go to and from the gym and things like that. I get in, I get the work done, and I'm out. So most of my lifting sessions last about 30 minutes or so. So usually I love to read as well. So normally in the morning, it's always I pray, I read, and then I lift. That's kind of my whole the whole mind, body, and soul thing kind of comes together first thing in the morning. And then as far as diet, it's seasonal. Right now, I'm trying to get very strong, and so I'm eating a lot. But sometimes I'm trying to cut back a little bit, maybe drop a little bit of weight. And so that's whenever I get much more disciplined with my body, and really kind of just bring in the brown rice and the boiled chicken and stuff like that. But it kind of, for me, I think that some of the more simple aesthetic things that, I'm going to bring up Thomas Merton again. I actually wrote my thesis on him for my theology masters. And so I know a lot about what he taught, but for him, he was an ascetic himself, and for him, step number one was to be able to try to find time of silence, right? To just completely shut off the mind and just allow God to be yourself, to be with God. And that to me, as part of my prayer, I always say, like, if anyone wants to get involved in this stuff, I would say that's number one, is to try to find time to just meditate, to just be quiet, to contemplate, and to pray. And then after that, that's when the physical asceticism starts stepping in, and that's when you can slowly start doing things. I've been doing this for 17 years now, so I kind of know my own body. I know how it's going to react to certain things, certain foods, things like that. Like I know if I eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's not going to hurt me that much. But if I eat four, then I'm going to be a flabby mess the next day. Like that's just how my body works. But really, it's kind of a day in, day out thing. And I try to also be ascetic in the way that I live out my vocation as well. If I want to sit there and watch TV, but my kid says, "Hey, Dad, can we go play catch?" You better believe I'm turning the TV off and I'm going to go play catch with my kids. Like that. It's an ascetic practice, but it's not what you would think of as asceticism. But self denial really is what asceticism is all about. Like letting go of who I am to completely live for the other. And so for me, the whole morning routine is all about becoming a good worker, like becoming a good employee, becoming a good father, becoming a good husband. Because if I don't have that time to devote to kind of myself and my own spiritual growth and my own physical growth, I know I'm not going to be able to do it very well in my vocation and in my employ. So for me, it's just about like, what are the small things? Teresa of Lisieux always said, "Do small things with great love." And to me, that's one of the best ascetic things that we can do, is just constantly think of the other in our life.
Right. And one of the principles that I feel like I've learned from specifically from the Tim Ferriss world and the, I guess, workout kind of modality has been that to be able to achieve the sort of spiritual or meditative disciplines or the work ethic, the more abstract disciplines that we crave, the easiest way to hack that, the fastest road to the discipline that we want, is by starting with the body. Like
Yep.
you can physicalize it, make it more concrete, and therefore have a very clear, like, I guess just a very clear goal or very clear concrete thing that you've done that helps to make the battle a little bit more tangible. And um, my example of that was I got into all of this, like the morning routine thing, um, actually back in 2013. I had gone through a like just a very devastating breakup, and in the context of the relationship that I'd been in, I was like deeply in love and uh, a lot of stress. It was a very difficult relationship for different reasons, and it dredged up all of this kind of core stuff that I didn't realize that I was dealing with, that I hadn't dealt with from my childhood, past wounds,
Sure.
and um, it kind of crescendoed into this perfect storm of doubt um, and mental disorder. And I was diagnosed with a chronic anxiety disorder and medicated, and was so crazy, just like detached from reality, that I could barely hold conversations with people
Mm.
without sort of like going into this weird, crazy, manic, like, just logical flow wasn't there. Anyway, I would wake up and go to bed in like a constant panic attack without being able to like see reality or break that cycle. And uh, I was forced to learn um, how to get out of it. Like it was like you had to figure out how to break the the feedback loop of anxiety in your body before you could break it in your mind.
Yeah.
You couldn't just think your way out of it. And so I had to start like doing yoga in the morning. And um, that was the first block of like doing something physical in the morning that had some sort of mental, um, I guess, payoff. Uh, and then when I started the business, like later, I needed more. Like I just needed another level up. So I started doing cold showers and doing like a a workout series of like pull-ups and just kind of calisthenics every morning. And those like each new habit that got added on top added a whole new level of like mental strength and capacity for like dealing with tribulation and temptation. And yeah, I mean, now like it's sort of part of our company culture that we built, that we take workout breaks together where we'll all go out and
So
do like lizard crawls and like pull-ups together. And it's kind of this like initiation for any new freelancers or whoever's like coming into the business, the daily workouts when we go out and do lizard crawls in the middle of the workday, you know. um we just talk about it. So anyway, I think um I've always craved this part of asceticism and never really knew that it was like so deeply connected to spirituality and to you know, living out my faith. And finding it was just like finding a nos fuel injection for
yeah.
like living
Yeah,
out the spiritual
and you
life.
know it's interesting. The catechism. You know, there's two places I always point to in the catechism. I'm forgetting the numbers right now, but one place says, you know, there is no holiness without self mastery, right? So another one says that the body and the soul are so connected that they ought to be considered as one. Not that they are one, but that they should be considered as one. And so to me, whenever you're creating that moment of self mastery in the body, you are literally working on your spirituality without you even knowing it. You know, that's why you had mentioned, like with a lot of the gym guys that go, all of a sudden they're open to this spirituality. I mean, and sadly, I mean, a lot of it is Eastern driven and you know, Taoism and things like that. But it at least becomes a moment of
Right.
recognizing they have a soul or a spirit, and recognizing that there's something deeper happening here. And just like you mentioned, like, you know, you were able to kind of get yourself out of this difficult time in your life through self mastery. And to me, I think the reason the body works so well is because it's a concrete reality of, if I can push myself in my body, then the rest of this stuff is nothing. You know, like
Mhm.
if I can, because when you're pushing yourself in your body, it hurts. It's not like, you know, it's painful. You know, that you, one day you wake up, you do 20 push-ups, the next day you try to do 21, and that 21st hurts really bad. Well, you got to push through it. That's part of the process. And so if you're doing that in sort of this concrete reality of the body, it spills so easily into all this other stuff, because then, I mean, you know, I get stress and anxiety and things like that from work or family life or things like that. But compared to picking up 600 pounds, it's not like super stressful. It's something that okay, I've been through difficult times. I can do this too, you know. And I think that's a really healthy way to look at life. And I think the Greeks were right of thinking that if we can discipline the body, then the mind and the spirit and the soul, they just follow. It flows really, really well.
So for people who are like wanting to start habits, like maybe they already, you know, have a decent like prayer schedule, morning routine. They wake up, they read, they do some sort of spiritual discipline, but they want to add like a physical dimension to that, and they want some simple thing that they can do to start. What would you say is a great place to start in terms of adding in some of that physical routine and practice?
Yeah, I think that part of it is going to be, and this is the beauty of the fitness culture, is finding out what you would find interesting. Like I always say, do something that you find fun. Like if you're going to do something that you're going to hate, that's not going to last. It's not going to become a habit, you know. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's lifting weights and martial arts. Those are the two things I really enjoy. If you tried to get me to go train for a marathon, I'd say peace out. You know, like that's just
Yeah.
not my world. But for somebody who is just simply trying, like totally from the beginning, I would say after your prayer time, sit down and stretch. Like just sitting down and just fully stretching out the body. And as you mentioned, yoga would be a great opportunity, or many of the static stretches or things like that. And then once you kind of feel, because most people are going to have to limber up to get to a point where they can do some really truly physical things, move into like burpees. I mean, you wake up and do 20 burpees, your heart's pumping. You're ready to go for the day, and that takes 3 minutes. It doesn't take that long. And so I would say that would be step number one. But then after that, you start adding in some calisthenics, things like that. But if you've got some background in sports or some background in lifting weights, moving into things like push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups and things like that. I mean, that stuff was literally military grade training up until like the 30s. Was push-ups, pull-ups, burpees, a lot of this body weight stuff. So it's really good for you. And it can definitely make you healthy. But then I would say it's definitely step number two, as far as like getting started, is drink water. I don't think the vast majority of people drink enough water throughout the day. It's mostly coffee, tea, soda, things like that. And to me, that stuff doesn't count. It just doesn't.
Hey, all that stuff has water in it, man.
It certainly does, but man, it doesn't count towards hydrating the body. If anything, it actually dehydrates the body.
Really,
and so,
tea dehydrates the body?
Well, yeah, it can, depending on the type of tea that you're drinking and all of that. But I would definitely recommend. I mean, of course, the minimum amount that the FDA says is like 8 glasses of water. So to me, that's 2 glasses per meal, and then 1 in the morning, 1 at night. Like that's not a lot of water. I drink a gallon a day, and I wouldn't recommend most people doing that because it took me a while to get to that point. But you'd be surprised how much better you sleep, how much better you feel, how much more energy you have when you are well hydrated. And so that can be ascetic in its own way if you're used to drinking nothing but tea and coffee and soda, because you're trying to drink that much water. It can take a toll on you because you're used to flavor all the time, and to me, it definitely becomes ascetic because like when I got ready for my bodybuilding competition, after like 3 months of literally zero sugar, an apple tasted like cake. I mean, because you just slowly start to realize like, wow, my taste buds were so used to all of this artificial stuff that I wasn't used to what an apple really ought to taste like. And so, things like, drinking water all day, you go back to that stuff, you're going to enjoy it more. I love coffee, man. That's probably my one drug in my life is coffee. And but coffee is a dehydrator as well, and so you have to kind of make up for the amount you drink. And even Tony Robbins, he always talks about, he calls it the morning flush. And basically he wakes up, of course he's got some like ridiculous water purifier in his house that creates the streams of Iceland in his house or whatever, but but he gets up and has one huge like 12-ounce thing of water and just downs it first thing. Wow. And he said it just wakes up your body. It gets the intestines moving, it gets the mind moving, it gets everything going. And so that's kind of his first move before he starts his whole meditation process and stuff.
That's really interesting.
So I think that there's definitely something to that as well.
Man, I'm gonna do that tomorrow. Morning flush. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. And it's not the other morning flush that most people.
Right. Multiple morning flushes. I have that's one of my practices as well. It takes me a long time to develop that one. But, yeah, I one of the things that I would recommend for people that want to start with like the stretching, do yoga with me .com. I think it's .com or .org, but it's a place where there's just a bunch of free yoga classes that you can just stream or watch, and you just watch like 10 minutes of one and do the like sun salutations or whatever along with it. But that's how I started my morning yoga practice, and now I just have like a routine that I always do every day. It's kind of like my flow, and it's automated, so I don't have to like think about it or try or it's just I wake up, roll out of bed, and I journal for like 15 to 20 minutes. Nice. Right when I wake up, and then I go into the yoga. But once I had that as a standard, like my body just felt better, and so I had more momentum to be able to do other things that were like adding more energy. It's sort of this like this waterfall effect where every little inch of ground gain gives you a multiplier of momentum to be able to do the next thing. So a lot of people think that, I don't know, they sort of like look at me and Marcellino and other people in the fellows like we're crazy because we do the cold shower thing. Like how the hell did you start doing that? Like that just sounds like torture. Um, but in reality, like it actually feels really good to me.
Yeah.
Um, because I've gotten to this point of like sort of my body is actually really warmed up and uh like heated up by doing the yoga and then doing the inverted push-ups and like pull-ups and stuff that I've done. Um, and also like I've been able to get there because I've sort of crawled up with these little, steps that slowly got like to the bigger, more intense stuff. So I'd say definitely like if you can just focus on getting one thing that's consistent that becomes automated, that you don't even have to think about, like that's when you can start adding a new thing in, you know?
Yeah. And what's really cool too is, I mean, those small things like doing yoga and doing cold showers and things like that, that actually creates a hormonal balance. Like cold showers actually increases testosterone. And for males, that means more energy. It means living happier. And all it took was sitting under some cold water. I mean, it's amazing how these small little things can make longer lasting effects in your life. And it's almost like you get addicted to the idea of I can push myself. One of the guys I listen to his podcast pretty regularly and follow him on a lot of stuff is Jocko Willink. I don't know if
Oh
you're
yeah.
familiar with him. That dude is intense. Like he is a serious dude. But you know what? I mean, that guy was a Navy SEAL. He went through some serious stuff and went to war and all this stuff. And even now, like he still pushes himself and says, like, embrace it. Like embrace the thing that you're scared of. And so I say, why not? You only got one life to live. Do it.
That's amazing. Okay, so I want to get a little bit more like uh big picture here for a second. Just fun thought experiment. If you could redesign, say, I'm not going to pick on the Theology of the Body Congress or anything, but like a Theology of the Body conference. Uh, if currently what happens now is people like bring in PhDs and everybody sits down in a like completely ugly, really totally stoic and not physically stimulating hotel room with fluorescent lighting and beige walls, and listen for like 8 hours a day on intellectually stimulating stuff about how important our bodies are, without ever actively using the body. If that's the normal standard for Catholic retreats and just conferences, what would you say would be the ideal vision, dream, like Catholic theology of the body conference? What would that actually look like to you?
I would say that John Paul II, before he was John Paul II, when he was Carol Tia, and he started talking to the young people about this stuff, he would take them to the mountains. He would take them to the mountain. He would go canoeing with them. He would bring, a good whiskey out there with him and go sit out in a field and just talk with them about this
Mm.
stuff. But then they would go hiking. Then they would go canoeing. Then they would just lay around and read some great poetry, right? Like the reason the theology of the body exists is because he's trying to get us back in the body. And I think this is something that we struggle with just as a culture. We live in the mind so much that it's hard to get down into the body. And so I would say that, if I had the money to do it, I would take a group of people, and it wouldn't be a huge 1,000, 2,000 thing. It'd be 20 people. Take them up to the mountains, go hiking, go canoeing, go do all these things physical. But then also sit down and just have moments of discussion and instruction and prayer and the like. And then have them go do it, right? Like send them out to go take some people. Not necessarily. I'm a mountains guy. I'm not necessarily like a beach guy or anything. I prefer the mountains. But that I would say that he gave us a model. It just isn't being done all that much. There's a few organizations that are starting to do that as well, of going back out into that. But his whole ethos of teaching people in that way was not sit them down like it's a classroom.
Yeah.
Rather, it was like a living experience of his philosophy. And I think there's something profoundly effective about that, because intellectual and more just downright real
Mm.
to a person's life.
Man, do you have you ever been to a Tony Robbins like conference or retreat or event or anything like that?
So I've live streamed a
Mhm.
few, but I've never like been to one personally. No.
Dude, you should definitely do it at some
Okay.
point. Uh, if somehow Word on Fire could sponsor you out to do one of those, just as like an investigative experience for building your own community. Holy shit, man, it is crazy.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you've live streamed it, you've kind of seen it, but like
Yeah.
uh, a lot of times with the live streaming, you get more of like the intervention and the talk stuff, but
Right.
the actual bodily part of the experience is so built in, and like you, I mean, dude, okay, you've got people who've paid at minimum, right, like $600 to $1,000 for this weekend event, and usually it's all corporate, sponsored people or business owners, entrepreneurs, people who have the means to do that, right? Like, um, so it's not like just hangers on or people that don't have willpower. Like we're talking, uh, people that have pretty strong stubborn wills in other like places, but here you've got 3,000 people come in. Okay, real quick, the reason why I was there, one of my mentors gave me a ticket and was like, you really need to go to one of these things, it'll like definitely blow your mind. And I was like, okay man, whatever, like Tony Robbins, self-help, I'll do it for the curiosity. But I went to this literally right before I went to a theology of the body event, and it like the stark difference between the two was just so like mind boggling that it like just slayed me. But part of the experience, the experience of like the Tony Robbins event is like he has everybody stand up immediately. Like when he comes on stage, like he has everybody stand up, like, and getting them to dance. Like literally, imagine 100 corporate, like, or sorry, 3,000 corporate executives who you would meet and be totally intimidated by, like in normal life, being asked and somehow like gotten to just like dance in a
Yeah.
like just imagine coming out like at a theology of the body conference or something like that, and it's just like all like 50 plus baby boomers, and somebody comes out and is just like, all right, like turn on the music, like everybody scream, and like start moving. And so people are like dancing, and he starts explaining that if you want to have breakthrough, you've got to be energy rich. It's the way he describes it, but like your body has to be really really like involved in the experience. And so if you're not like moving around and like yelling and like your body isn't being really engaged deeply, it's whatever you learn intellectually isn't going to make it all the way down into your habits and
Mm.
into your psychology. So anyway, the end of the Friday, like first day experience, you've gone through all this like meditative stuff, you're like dancing, you're meeting people, you're yelling, whatever, getting hyped up. And at the end of it, like the experience is everybody has to go out and walk on coals. Like there's a fire walk.
That's awesome.
Literally 3,000 people. And one, you walk in during the day, and when you're like walking in to register for the conference, you see this gigantic fire in the parking lot, like huge billowing flames. Because if you're gonna have 3,000 people walk over coals and you don't want it to take all night, like you need a lot of coals. So it's like this entire parking lot of fire. And so you're just like, what the hell is that? Anyway, afterwards, basically he hypnotizes everybody and then has them go out and walk on coals. And I just am like the experience of like pushing people to breakthrough. You want mental, spiritual breakthrough. If you're not engaging your body in that, like in some sort of physical way, like in some sort of physical journey, you're not going to get the kind of like I guess intensity that you would get if you had it. So anyway, my dream would be to have like a theology of the body conference where people are actually like, you wake up, first session is everybody does yoga, and then there's a talk by like some sort of bishop about something really
Yeah.
beautiful. And then right after that, there's like, uh, a workout where everybody's doing kinesthetics and like, whatever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
that
and
would be
I've
crazy.
been to a couple different like powerlifting seminars and different things like that, and there's even something about like man today is so I guess removed from what he was meant to live. So like we're not meant to sit at desks 8 hours a day and stare at a screen, right? Like that's just not what we are built for. We're built as hunter gatherers. Like we're supposed to be out in the wild. We're supposed to be moving all day. We're supposed to be doing things like that. And then some of these powerlifting things, like right when they start, they'll say, "Okay, find the guy next to you, and both of you just scream at each other. Like
Mhm.
don't scream expletives. Don't do any of that. Just yell and stare at the guy in the eye while you're doing it."
Yeah.
It's kind of awkward, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like it's kind of freeing. And all of a sudden,
Right.
you're next to this guy. You're like, we're kind of buddies now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
like his spit flex just hit me on the face while he was screaming, and now we're buddies. So there's certainly something to that, and I do think that a lot of our conferences could handle or use a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Just a lot of it would take a lot of people being willing to like break some really, really intense social rules. And man, I can't wait until the church is willing to do that, like as a tribe. Because really that's what it takes to build a community, right? Like you
Absolutely.
if you break if you expect a group of people to sort of break social norms together, like man, breaking the social norm of like I guess living purely or of being willing to speak to somebody about Christ and share the gospel. Like those are pretty awkward things to do. Uh, Actually, I feel like it would be a lot easier to start by just screaming at a stranger in the face. Like
Yeah.
we got to
Yeah,
build up to
absolutely.
it. We
Yeah, and
can't do.
I'm really big on building a tribe. Call
Mhm.
it a tribe of people. And if you think about like the way things were, whenever you would still consider people, groups of people tribes, they worked together, they fought together, they wrestled together, they knitted together, they had babies. Like all of the women went under the red tent and had and helped the lady have the baby. And whenever someone died, it was a whole community thing that they showed
Mhm.
up and had this whole routine and ritual and all of this stuff. And unfortunately, we've become kind of boxed in on ourselves where that idea of community and closeness is kind of awkward. And I think that the fitness culture has opened up an opportunity for us to create community again. But we do have to, as you mentioned, I mean, break some of those social norms within our own circles to start doing that stuff. And but the people that are in the gym are going to be used to it. Like it's not
Yeah,
going to be out of the norm for them. They're going to think, oh, this is something that I've already been a part of.
yeah, dude,
It's a different world.
for sure, man. Well, I didn't ask you at all about like your work with Word on Fire, so I'd love to give you a chance to sort of talk about that. You're making a movement right now. You're kind of like building a tribe. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing with them.
Yeah, if anyone has heard Bishop Barron talking about, basically his latest book called "To Light a Fire on the Earth," there's a part in there where he talks about the desire for a Word on Fire movement. One thing that Cardinal George challenged him on was, throughout the history of the church, whenever you have a major problem, you usually have a movement there to answer it, right? So you've got the Dominicans for certain reasons. You've got the Franciscans for certain reasons. You've got, you name it. And all of them answered a problem either within the culture or within the church. And right now, as Bishop Barron, I think rightly says, the number one problem we're facing today is the rise of the unaffiliated, the people that just simply don't care enough about religion to even investigate into it, as well as fallen away Catholics who oftentimes become unaffiliated now. Like the generation coming up is going to be 50% unaffiliated. So it's a big problem. And so part of what we're trying to strategize and figure out is how could something like a Word on Fire movement help to answer that problem? And so what I've been strategizing and working on really is kind of a step one of the process of if you want to be involved in this, we've got to have a form of formation for people to kind of form them in the Word on Fire ethos of evangelization. If you go to the Word on Fire show, the podcast, we've now done, I think, 6 of our 8 principles of our ethos. And those are really what we're hoping to form people into, specifically go after the unaffiliated. And as we mentioned before, that's going to require breaking some social norms, breaking the norms of what it means to evangelize today, because the vast majority of these people aren't going to cross the doorstep of a church. So we're going to have to figure out different ways to go beyond the periphery, and in large part, with the Word on Fire ethos being about culture, it's recognizing ways in which we can go into a culture and plant seeds of Christ within it, which is kind of what our conversation's been about today. Of like, I recognize that there's this beautiful fitness culture, and I think that there's something deeper here. So let me become a part of it and start planting seeds of Christ within it. And so that's really what I've been working on. We've got some stuff launching later this year that I'm pretty excited about. Everybody keep an eye out for that. But yeah, it's been an amazing blessing getting to work with Bishop Barron. I mean, they really, Father Steve Grunow is the CEO of Word on Fire, and really have encouraged me for about 4 or 5 years to do this fitness stuff. Like they recognized what I was doing, and that really became the beginning of the relationship. Was recognizing like that trying to move into a culture and plant seeds within it, that's a different route of access than what has often been in evangelization, which is more of like a top-down thing of like, let's invite them to an event, or let's, this kind of stuff, as opposed to let me go become part of that very culture and start planting seeds within it, and right, speaking to people about Christ within that culture. It's kind of like, Francis Xavier would, whenever he would go to the poor, he would dress like a poor man. Whenever he would go to the rich, he would dress like a rich man. And whenever he'd go to the religious, he would dress like a guru, because he understood, like, we've got to meet on a common ground here. And that's when I can start talking about Christ, once we agree on these things. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible, I've been there now full time for about a year. I've done some off and on stuff for them for about 4 years now, but then went full time with them almost exactly a year ago.
Wow, man, cool. That's are we going to be seeing any like workout gym rat style evangelical experiences or retreats coming out anytime soon?
Well, I'm thinking about doing some local stuff, here in Texas, to kind of get some things moving. Got a buddy of mine that's he owns a gym over in Carrollton, Texas, and starting doing some stuff over there. Yeah, for sure, on my end, and if we'll of course have some formation on asceticism and things like that at Word on Fire as well. And then eventually we'll start seeing some stuff like that as well, some retreats and things like that. And we'll start taking in a lot of these thought processes and figuring out best practices of who's making an impact on people, and how and why. So guys like Tony Robbins and things like that, recognizing the best practices of what they do and taking them into our own as well. So for sure.
Yeah. Well, I will walk on fire for Bishop Barron anytime. So if he ever wants to make that happen, I'm all in. So yeah, man, thank you so much for taking the time to
Happy to
hang out and talk about this stuff. It's definitely one of my favorite topics. So hopefully we can bring a round 2 in sometime soon.
I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be great, man.
All right. Well, cool. I'm gonna let you go, but hey, have an awesome rest of your year, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the hopefully soon, but if not soon, then at least at the summit round 2.
For sure. That sounds great, man. And thank you for all you're doing for the church, and super impressed with Catholic Creatos and Sherwood Fellows and everything you're doing, man. Really appreciate it.
Dude. All right. God bless, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, you as well.